Welcome everybody to MogTalk. It is Saturday, August 13th. This is episode 257. And if you don't know anything about MogTalk, we talk about Final Fantasy XIV, everything from Savage Raiding to Chocobo Racing, and we're bringing on an amazing player, JeatheBelle. Is that how people sometimes say?
JeatheBelle.
Oh, JeatheBelle. Oh, okay, I get it now. All right.
I just made that up too. It's a randomly generated name from World of Warcraft. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Well, real quick, if you don't mind, just can you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. I am Jesse. I have been a hardcore World of Warcraft player for a very long time. For a while, I had the dubious distinction of being the oldest person rating for World First in World of Warcraft. I succeeded several times, and then recently got into Final Fantasy instead.
Okay. That's a good one. That's a good introduction. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into all that, of course, too.
Absolutely.
They're telling me it's Robin now, by the way.
It is my, when I finally, we'll talk about this more too, but when I finally started playing the MSQ randomly, I made a character and didn't expect to become as invested in that character as I actually ended up being. But I am now Robin in Final Fantasy, and I love Robin. We all love Robin. Robin is beautiful. Not very bright, but he tries his best.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's weird. Did you have that same kind of feeling with WoW ever, where you got kind of invested into your character?
No. I mean, the simple answer is no. I can go into that more. There's a couple of reasons why. I started playing World of Warcraft and Warlords of Draenor, and very quickly my goal was to become as good as I could be, which meant even that far back, making alts. Within half a year of starting the game, I was playing 3 different characters, all of them the same class, so that I could practice becoming as good a paladin as I could, playing 3 times a week in 3 different raid guilds, so that I could do 3 different lockouts per week in practice. And when you do that, it dilutes your experience with a character. It's hard to be invested in a character and believe that you're RPing as a character and care about that character's experiences in a world when you have 3 of them. And then imagine how much worse it is now when you have 8.
Yeah, no, that's I haven't had to worry about.
When you pair that, I would say, with the fact that in Final Fantasy, you see your character involved in decision makings and in cutscenes over and over again, partaking in conversations, it creates an opportunity, if you allow it to happen, to identify with your character and that character's decisions in a way that doesn't happen in WoW ever. So those 2 factors combined, I think, made what happened with me and my friend Robin unique and new for me.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, you said a handful of things that definitely wrong with me. It's funny. I quit WoW around Warlords of Draenor.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people say that. You started at the wrong time, Jesse. What were you thinking?
Yeah, that was literally, I think Cataclysm is, when it started, sadly, to diminish a little bit. Everyone will say the golden days is Wrath of the Lich King. But man, it's ancient to me now. And the other thing you said about having to make all these different characters, you kind of, if you want to do really, really, really hardcore rating in Final Fantasy XIV and do that, you can, but it's not required in any real way.
Recently, with me quitting WoW, I wasn't sure if Echo was going to be doing 6.2, so I actually spent some time looking at a couple of statics and talking to people about playing with them in 6.2, and one of them, actually 2 of them, mentioned that they liked running splits with 1 split character, and they were really anxious in DMs with me to be like, are you sure that you're okay with maintaining a second character? I'm like, oh, honey. You have no idea how little this matters to me.
Yeah.
How unimpactful this is on my time.
Yeah, it's a completely different scenario. But that's awesome, man. Well, before we get too much into it, for people like even myself, in some regard here, might not be extremely familiar with your past and history. You said you start with Warlords of Draenor. Is that when you started your hardcore gaming days, or did you have any experience before then?
So I I mean, I played games for a long time, but very, very casually. I played Civilization 1, Civ 2, Civ 3, Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2 and 3, StarCraft. But then I did adulthood stuff and I kind of speed ran it. Went to college, got married, went to law school, had babies, worked as a corporate litigator for a while, raised babies, worked as a prosecutor for a while, and then uh, being extremely dissatisfied with being a lawyer in general, started playing games more often.
Mm.
And I started with a game called I'm sure you've heard of it, Star Wars: The Old Republic. It was an
Yeah.
amazing RPG MMO game. Played that for a while. It was great. Everyone remembers Hutball. Any Hutball champions in chat? And really enjoyed that. And then because I enjoyed that, people were like, "Hey, you should try World of Warcraft." So I did, and I fell in love with it. The rating, the dungeons, the community, it was all amazing, and I started playing that, and quickly decided, yo, okay, I think that I can get good at this, and I want to get good at this, and I'm going to get good at this, and then I started doing the WoW things, and it was
Mhm.
very fast. Within 6 months of the beginning of Warlords of Draenor, when I started, I was shopping for and finding a Mythic Raiding Guild, and as soon as I had logs with one Mythic Raiding Guild, I hopped to the next one for the following tier, and then hopped to the next one for the following tier, and by the end of Warlords of Draenor, I was in Midwinter going into Legion. So as quickly as I could, I was transitioning into playing that game well.
Mhm.
I think you could make a convincing argument that if I was going to get good at video games, I chose the wrong one. But it
Man.
was a blast, and I had a good time along the way.
I wouldn't say WoW would be the wrong one. I mean, I chose to be a huge part of a much smaller MMO at the time, Final Fantasy XIV.
Now, that was definitely the wrong one,
Yeah, it was
except
kind
to
of
the
a wrong
extent
play.
that having fun is never wrong.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
not necessarily for transitioning out of, hey, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore, and somehow finding some other way of paying grocery bills.
that's fair. That's fair. So how'd you get involved with Echo?
So at the midpoint, I at the about halfway through Legion,
Mhm.
I joined Limit, which at the time was the best US guild, and around World Fifth, usually raiding in the evenings. They recruited me out of Midwinter during Nighthold, and I raided with them to the end of Legion. And by a couple of months, then I was an officer in the guild, and we talked as a group about, hey, it'd be cool if we gave World First a shot, if we tried to get World First. So going into the most recent but one expansion in BFA, Limit decided to start going for World First and became instantly a frontrunner competitor for World First. It became a Limit versus Method race for as long as that lasted, and then Method uh, fiasco occurred, and the Echo group split off from Method, right?
Mhm.
So what happened was about halfway through BFA, I went to the Echo team, which was then playing for Method, and was like, yo, um, are you recruiting? I'd like to play with you guys. And they recruited me and ended up playing with them. And then we went through that whole process of forming Echo and competing as Echo. And then that's why I was with Echo for basically, I don't even know, over a year now, maybe
Mm.
even longer. But with that team of players for even longer than that.
Okay.
I was so I guess the short answer is I was a founding member of Echo, and that's how I ended up being with them.
Fair enough. So it's interesting because when I think of Echo, I think of EU, but
Hmm.
you're not EU.
It is correct. Everyone at first assumes that I'm European because I play with the European Guild. It's actually fascinating to me. It seems almost, and I hope you'll forgive me for saying this, it seems almost antiquated to me that we identify players by their regional differences in
Hmm.
2022. Um, obviously latency is a thing, and I think
Yeah.
that's driving it to a large degree. People assume that you're going to play where your latency is the least, especially in games like first-person shooters where latency matters a lot. But even in MMOs, it matters a little bit. If you have an extra zero point 0.2 seconds reaction time tax, it's going to matter in something like DSR or moving balls about to hit you or things like that. And so we assume that people are going to play where their latency is the least, but I'm actually not even the only person who plays with Echo from NA. There's 2 of us that played with Echo from NA. And there's several players from EU that play in North American guilds as well. In MMOs, it's becoming significantly more common than it was in the past. But everyone assumes I'm European. In fact, it's not uncommon that someone will come into my stream, see me playing with Echo and say, "Wow, bro, you have a really good English accent. Where did you go to school? Your English is amazing." And I'm like, "Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I don't take it for granted." But actually, I'm American. But
Yeah.
I would, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I do agree. The regional differences is something that has always been kind of odd in some regards, but it was mostly due to how the servers function and latency and the division that came from that. You want to play on the servers where you have the best latency and everything, right? Of course, that has changed. I can let you know a lot of Final Fantasy XIV world first groups were mixed regions, but they were based out of NA servers, or they were based out of EU servers or JP servers. And so it's not uncommon at all. I mean, back in the day when we had EU servers that were in Canada, it was a little bit different where it didn't matter at all.
Right.
But I think one of the top leading world first groups right now has players from New Zealand, right? And they're playing
a lot of latency.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not as common anymore. I think when we talk about Final Fantasy XIV world races, EU and NA can kind of blend together like that, but then it's a lot more difficult with the JP side of the race.
You're also adding a language barrier there.
Yeah.
Similarly in WoW, you have a lot of, it used to be very rare, like you say, it's growing more and more that people will play across region, but you don't have very many Asian players from Asian region playing with American or EU servers or vice versa. I've played with a young man from Taiwan, and I played with someone from Singapore, and there was a little bit of a language barrier, and neither of those lasted very, very long. Because of the language barrier. And I can't imagine vice versa, like me going and playing on I used to joke about this, right? Because for a while, I was really good at getting world second. And I got world second in an A, and then I got world second in EU, and there was a little bit of a joke. Okay, it's time to go make a character on an Asian server and get world second with Asia. But the idea is prohibitive because of the language barrier. The latency has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's mostly what it is. It's the language barrier, and just like there is actually a handful of like kind of cultural gaming differences that's a little bit more significant, JP versus EU versus NA, that I've known and that we've seen kind of with the world racing scene. Like most of the world racing scene, at least for Final Fantasy XIV, there aren't groups on the JP servers that say they're world racing, even if they are going as hard as they can, and they will likely get first. So there's a big difference.
Is that
to it.
Expectations management? Don't want to say we're going for it and then not win? Or
yes, I think it's mostly due to like having that pressure on there. Like the times that we've had world first from the JP servers, the group never said anything about racing. They just popped up and they're like, "Yeah, we killed it before all you guys, haha." Yeah. They just kind of go away.
I mean, that's the the Twitch emote, the Chad way to do it, right?
Yeah,
shows up, gets world first, doesn't elaborate, leaves. That's
there was one, and their group didn't have a name. They literally had no name, no like association. So their group's name was No Name.
That's a good name.
Yeah. But all that being said, just trying to like learn a little bit about your history and past with all the stuff before Final Fantasy XIV happened. So now I am kind of curious about what did you think about Final Fantasy XIV as kind of a WoW player going into this MMO? Was there the only reason that you joined it because Echo wanted to do stuff in there, or were you like generally interested in playing it?
There's a little bit of a longer story here that almost no one knows, and I think you'll be interested by.
Okay.
Several years ago, when I think we were in BFA at the time and starting to compete for world first in World of Warcraft. And I believe that Final Fantasy was in Shadowbringers. I had a friend named Zealot who played Final Fantasy. And he was like, hey, Jesse, it'd be cool if you played this game with me. And I was like, all right, I like trying out MMOs. Star Wars Republic was pretty cool. I'll come try it. And he's like, great. We have a healer spot. I need you to play Astrologian, and I'd like you to be leveled by next week. I was like, okay. So I went and I got my credit card and I swiped and I went through some quests and I have no idea what they were like. And I ended up at max level and we went into the raid, which, no, it wasn't even Shadowbringers, was it? It was Stormblood, I think.
Stormblood.
The boss was the big blob with the gravity that you go up and down in.
Oh, yeah, that's... what's his name? I think it starts with a C. Why can't I? Cataclysm or something?
Omega raids, right? It's Omega raids. So this was years ago, and this was my first ever encounter with Final Fantasy XIV. Skipping the story, blasting straight to the raid, being plugged into a stack that's already cleared. Okay, and I fucking hated it. I hated it. It was awful. I had no idea what off GCDs were like. I was used to World of Warcraft. If I push an off GCD, it goes off instantly and I can push my next global. I can't do that. I couldn't weave. And then, don't even get me started on, I was out of that thing before it went off and it still killed me snapshotting. I quit in like 2 weeks. It was over. I was done. I hate this game. Okay? That was my first interaction and nothing else happened for 2 years.
Okay.
And then... there was a huge influx of WoW players to Final Fantasy. Asmongold started playing. Limit did an event. And obviously that got Echo's attention. We're always looking for events. Events equals streaming. Streaming equals money. Money equals groceries. I like buying my groceries. All right, Scribe. Yes, I'll join you. Scribe's like, we need a healer and we'd like you to play Astrologian. And that was Shadowbringers. And I swiped and leveled and we went in and we did Eden. But it was different because this time, instead of like being plugged into a group that already knew what it was doing and feeling like I was a terrible player, instead I played a lot before our group was going to play. And I did a lot of old content. I did a lot of alliance raids. I learned how the game worked. I learned what snapshotting was. I learned how the markers worked. And I actually had a huge amount of fun in Eden. And that is how I first got into Final Fantasy. Before Zealot said try it out, I don't know that I'd ever heard of it. After he said tried it out, I'd heard of it and I thought it sucked. and then it became this big thing in a way to buy like grocery money or to get grocery money. And I was like, all right, I like grocery money, I'll do it. And it turned out to be really fun raiding. And that was like that first hook about a year ago now in Eden when we did Eden with Echo. That got me.
Yeah. Was that the one that I was doing commentary on? Can't even remember. I think there was one of them. So long ago now. I've had a kid. It feels like a decade.
It has been emotionally, mentally, and physically for you. It has been a decade.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a while back, man.
I think it was Echo. We put together this whole event to try to capitalize on. Let's be honest, right? We were trying to capitalize on the hype.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, 8 Echo World of Warcraft World First Raiders are going to go in and do Eden completely blind, minimum itemable, no Echo, and we did, and it was fun and hilarious, and I'm sure amazing to watch. Anyone remember Healer Jail incidents on Titan? And I think it was you talking about him as well.
Yeah,
I think you were part involved.
I don't know if it was that. I can't remember which part I did commentary on at this point.
We had a good enough time though that we went back and we did Eden Part 2 and Eden Part 3, and then came back again in Endwalker. So it did work.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, that whole influx, Asmongold was the catalyst towards, hey, Final Fantasy XIV is not a shitty game. And so it was amazing that happened, and it was a whole experience kind of seeing all that happen. It's a year passed from when that went down, and it's just completely different perspective than we had before, because at least I felt like the Final Fantasy XIV community was isolated in some regards from the WoW community. And when events happened like that, it was always WoW versus Final Fantasy 14. 14 sucks. Cat girls, cat boys. That's all it is.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
remember we had a World of Warcraft race that coincided with something in Final Fantasy, and at the time I was so dialed out that I didn't even know what was going on. But I remember people were like, "Oh, they're trying to commentate a little bit of what's happening in that game."
Mhm.
But you're right. Like the two communities were thoroughly divorced from one another and essentially viewed each other with scorn, largely. I think.
Yeah. And then all Blizzard had to do was like massively screw up. And it kind of worked out.
I guess so. Yeah. Can't
Yeah.
argue with that.
Oh man. All right. Well, so getting into Final Fantasy 14, I guess when you were going through and you were trying to get more familiar with Final Fantasy 14, you started to like it, I guess, a lot more. Was it? I'm guessing it wasn't just the rating. It was a lot with the story that you felt like you were getting kind of sucked into it a little bit, and you felt a part of.
You are completely wrong, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Okay. Tell me what sucked you in.
So we started a year ago doing Eden and doing blind progression. In a game where it was actually blind because there was no PTR testing and there was no dungeon journal and there was nothing to tell you what anything was doing except your own eyes and your own brain was really, really fun. And then doing fights that worked right and that you couldn't simply cheese and that weren't bugged and didn't need constant tuning was really, really fun. And then that first tier of Eden was really good. That's what hooked me. I had an absolute blast. I will always be that kind of competitive progression rater who loves working with a team to solve a puzzle and execute the fight correctly and win. That is heroin to me. I mean, it is addictively exhilarating. I don't know. It's sex.
Yeah.
It's so good. and Final Fantasy's fights are really good. They're very different than WoW's, but they are really, really good. So that's what hooked me. And it hooked me through Eden 1, it hooked me through Eden 2, it hooked me through Eden 3. But the story still hadn't touched me. I was still in full, elite World of Warcraft raider mode. And elite World of Warcraft raiders do not pay attention to the story because the story is shit. We all know that. It's given. It's a fact. You can't pay attention to the story. You skip it as fast as you can. You level as fast as you can. You get to the good stuff. That's the mode I was in. And I was still in that mode at the beginning of Endwalker, right? When Endwalker launched, I had pre-ordered because we knew we were going to do the new tier. We were excited about the raids because they're so good. But there was that whole, problems with logins. You couldn't log in, queues. I couldn't actually log in during the entire introductory period, right? The pre-launch period. And it didn't matter to me because I just spacebar, escape, watching Netflix on the other screen while I rushed through the story to get to the raid. That was true all the way through this entire past year until we finally tried DSR in April and May. That is when other things started getting me. Up until then, I was pristine and pure.
Okay. That's actually, I forgot all about the Endwalker launch and the poor servers and then the bug with the login and everything else. And it was just such a pain. And you just have to just stay logged in once you get in there. Because if you get
I heard about that.
Yeah.
It reminded me of times when WoW would have queues and people would have, well, obviously there are software solutions now and there are hardware solutions now, macros that keep you from being AFK, but people would set up like fans to trigger a lever that pushes a pencil, that pushes a key every 5 seconds, the mechanical solutions. I just CVA'd with all of it. I was like, I'm going to skip the story anyway. It's going to take me 30 minutes. I don't care if I get to log in.
Yeah. So, okay. You said it wasn't until only very recently you got into the main story. Like,
correct. I started playing the MSQ in May.
Jeez, dude, and you've completed everything?
Over a month ago at this point. Wow. I did the entire MSQ from May through mid-July.
That is, so all this stuff is extremely fresh to you.
It is, yeah.
Did you do any of the extra quest or anything, or was it just the MSQ?
Some of them. So I have some mods who enjoy talking to me about video games and have hung out in the stream for a long time, who had been trying to get me to play the MSQ for a year. And when I said on a lark, almost impulsively, maybe I'll make a character tonight and try, They spent hours brainstorming and putting together this amazing route through the MSQ that included a huge amount of side content to ensure that anytime the MSQ referred to anything that happened in the past, even if it was a side content, I had done it, right? They mapped out and choreographed this route. So some of the side content I have done that was considered like good to have done, Sky Pirates, things like that get referred to later. And some I haven't if they didn't think it was as good, but have since come back to, right? So, for example, Hildebrand, I hadn't done as part of the MSQ, but after I finished the MSQ, I went through that entire story as well. I think that a lot of people have said that I went through fast. To me, it didn't feel like I was going through fast. To me, it felt like I was mainlining something I needed, right? It's a testament to how good it was. I was waking up every day at 4:30 in the morning so that I could do more MSQ, starting at 5 in the morning, and streaming at least 12 hours every single day so that I could continue to see what happened next. And every night I'd be like, I guess I have to stop now. You guys have to go to bed. It's midnight in Europe. I'll see you at 5 in the morning tomorrow. I couldn't stop. I needed to see what happened next.
That's awesome. Are you like someone who reads a lot or watches a lot of movies or invest yourself in like heavy entertainment outside of, video games?
I read a lot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Pretty much every night before bed.
Every night before, like, all right. Are you willing to say what you read? Are you reading like romance novels or?
Oh, the Harlequin novels are my. I primarily read science fiction and fantasy books. Okay,
so it lines up very well. That's Final Fantasy XIV.
It is, both of them together. I'll never forget how. I mean, okay, there's so many examples of this, but maybe the most recent example is how, a demigod has created a species of super intelligent bunnies to run a spaceship that is disguised as a moon, which, by the way, is also a prison. It's just like, what is this? This is some kind of unbelievable chimera of science fiction and fantasy that isn't even, and it's Final Fantasy XIV. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, did you play a lot of Final Fantasies before doing 14?
None. This is my first
Really?
one.
Oh, geez, man. That's... I've heard that a lot recently, but for me, that seems insane. I'd say we're relatively in the same kind of age group here. Final Fantasy VII came out, and that was the RPG, right? That was like what people played back then. And then Final Fantasy VI, when it was 3, was also the RPG. Were you not into RPGs when you were growing up?
I didn't play RPGs, no. I didn't get into video games until I left home for various reasons that are not an appropriate conversation for this.
Perfectly fine. You don't have to.
But when I became an adult, that's when I started playing video games. And for some reason, like the JRPGs just never impinged on my radar. I didn't play any of them, right? I played strategy games, turn-based games, and RTSs for the most part until my first MMO, and that led me right into WoW. So I never played any Final Fantasy games or any other Asian games that I can really think of at all.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. For me, that just seems like impossible growing up as a gamer.
A lot of people in my stream agree with you. And the same people that tried to craft my way through the MSQ are trying to craft my way through upcoming Final Fantasy games as well.
You should. No reason not to. It's content.
I agree. If 14 is this good, why would I not at least try the other ones, or at least some of the other ones? The biggest problem I have is deciding which one. And normally when I decide... Normally, if I have an abundance of options and I'm trying to decide which one I'm going to do, I'll say, I'll do, such and such X. But the problem is if I say, I'll play some kind of Final Fantasy, whatever, Final Fantasy X, then my entire stream is like, X? That's a great one. You should definitely start with X.
Well, X is a Final Fantasy, so you just said you're going to play Final Fantasy X. So, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Okay. All right. I want to break this down a little bit because going through the story, you have to go through, the base story, then 4 expansions afterwards. Was there any of them, like coming from your perspective, like I did it over the course of their release, right? So these things...
You started at the beginning?
Yeah, well, I didn't do 1.0. I did it at 2.0.
The second beginning.
Yeah, the second beginning. But when you did it, you kind of went through all of them back to back. And it's a different experience. Like if you ever watch a series and you're just watching it one at a time, every week or every month you watch an episode, then versus the situation where you just kind of sit down and you watch them over and over and over again. You feel a different experience.
Absolutely.
Do you feel, just from your perspective doing that you have a preferred expansion for Final Fantasy XIV?
Touching on that real quick first, it's very interesting because it's something I talked about on my stream, because they would sometimes say things like, imagine if you had to wait to find this answer. There are definitely some pros and cons to smashing it. There were things that were really raw to me because they had just happened 2 days ago. Or sometimes a character would say, do you remember when? And people would be like, yeah, it was yesterday. And then versus on the other hand, my answers, I never had to wait. If I had a question, it got answered the next day or 2 days later. So back to your question was whether I had a favorite expansion.
Yeah.
My favorite expansion. Normally, I don't do tier lists. I think they're. Well, normally I don't do tier lists.
Sure. Okay, let's say, was there a point?
But there is an answer here, right? Okay. Which is that I think Shadowbringers is my favorite because it was to me, Shadowbringers, as a consumer of a lot of stories. I've consumed a lot of stories in video games, in books, in plays, in operas, in TV shows and movies. I mean, we all love stories, right? Shadowbringers was the most interesting, complex, well-woven story they told. It was literary. I would place it in the top 5 or 10 stories I've consumed across all literature, movies, and games ever.
Wow.
As an expansion. So it is my favorite because of that.
Okay. Yeah. I think a lot of people may agree with you. Endwalker hits different. It's kind of a different feel to it. But
it's
Shadowbringers,
a different experience. If you'll forgive the interruption, I feel like Shadowbringers is the more cohesive, complete, self-contained story that you can look at and be like, this could be a book. Whereas Endwalker is not. It's more like it's the last book of an epic author's like trilogy, weaving together everything that's happened before into a satisfying conclusion. It's a different thing almost.
Yeah. When it came out, by the way, Shadowbringers was considered like a masterpiece, and it was heavily advertised that this is one of the best game expansions that ever came out ever. So
I agree.
It's not surprising to hear you say that. When that big WoW movement came into Final Fantasy XIV, that was during Shadowbringers, and everyone who came over and actually did the story got to end on this amazing story that was considered and heralded as one of the best expansions ever. So it's just the timing of all that stuff was perfect for Final Fantasy XIV.
Very serendipitous.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I skipped everything and had no idea what was going on.
Yep. Not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And I mean, to be honest with you, if you're enjoying yourself skipping the story, it doesn't matter. You can always go back. Yeah. Always. It's always there. It never just goes away, right? So you never really... I mean, you might sort of spoil something, at some point, but if you're not thinking about the story in the first place, are you really spoiling anything? It doesn't...
No. I can attest to that with and so can my stream who saw what I was going through and witnessed my reactions. Having quote unquote played through it, spamming spacebar and escape as fast as you can. People who have played the story and actually experienced it underestimate, I think, how little happens outside of that stuff you skip. If you skip every quest box by the spacebar, you skip every cutscene, and you don't read any quest, you have no idea of anything. Nothing happens out of that. And meanwhile, by the way, I'm also watching Netflix on the other screen. Like I had no idea what happened in Shadowbringers. In Endwalker, people kept asking me, "Didn't you play this in order to do the tier?" And I had. And the only thing that I remember from Endwalker was that at some point I was on the moon, completely lost, couldn't find where I was trying to find this stupid quest to turn in so I could go back to my Netflix screen. And the only reason I remember is because I was so lost I had to actually look away from my show. That was it. That's all I remembered.
Trying to find what kind of dog is that? I don't even know what kind of dog
that is. It's a dog, and there was a chasm, and apparently the dog had showed me the way, and now I know the way because this time I was actually, playing the game. But at the time, I had paid no attention and had no idea where I was going, and was completely lost.
Yeah, you just saw some bunnies pop up, right? And you're like, "What the hell am I doing?"
Exactly. Yeah. You click on the quest, you follow the arrow, you glance over on YouTube. But there isn't. another serendipity, right? This is pure luck. But the way that they've crafted the story to be displayed through these conversations, cutscenes, and quest boxes is such that if you skip, you aren't even spoiling yourself, really. You know, there's almost no damage done.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how intentional that is. Like when they're making the game,
I doubt it's intentional at all.
Yeah, yeah. I think it just kind of works out that way. But man, sorry, I'm trying to think of. Someone said dogphilia, and I'm like, yeah, I forgot about that.
That bothers me. Someone said that on my stream too. It's the community's disdain for Minfilia irks me. She's a good character.
Is she?
Yes, of course she is. Okay. She doesn't have a combat job. She's not a warrior or a dark knight or a fighter, but what she is a leader and an inspirer, and she does the absolute best she can. She provides inspiration and leadership to a group of people that wouldn't have come together if it weren't for her, who would be bereft without her leadership.
Yeah.
I think that those roles are important, and worth not calling her dogphilia.
Well, it was a dog. It was
yeah. I mean, that's true.
You know, it adds up. But I mean, this is also coming from people. I don't know if this the people who are saying that it's completely true, but it's from the people who experience Minfilia in A Realm Reborn and didn't have all this extra stuff that was added in the other experiences. So there was like years of dealing, because A Realm Reborn, she really wasn't that much of a character that you felt a lot for. I mean, when you get into the ending cutscene of A Realm Reborn, things start to change a little bit because you think everyone's dying, right?
Yeah. One by one.
But man, it was pretty good. I'm just recalling those days back, experiencing the story, and just we were talking about just a little bit ago. But yeah, when we were waiting for these expansions, we sat waiting, theorizing, and talking, and having tons of discussions about this, right? And so there was so much.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, there's so much just going through our heads, and so much excitement for what is the answer. We think it's this, but getting those results afterwards.
I have a really good example of that, actually. This is kind of interesting. I assume spoilers are okay on the show, right?
Absolutely. By the way, our spoiler meter is literally dependent on the guest. And so if you've seen everything, the whole goal is to not spoil things for you. I don't care. The viewers, whatever. Safe. Screw them.
All right. Yeah, true. They're just there to give us money.
Yeah, sure.
So what I was going to say, this is actually really interesting because doing the MSQ like I did, mainlined, has some advantages in that things are really fresh in my head. I remember details very clearly. But on the other hand, I don't have this like year-long period to speculate, rewatch, and then come together in a community, an unbelievably passionate, interested, devoted, and intelligent community, by the way, to come up with really cool theories. And so like when, I don't know if you've seen this clip, there's a very famous clip out there when they start bringing people back to life. And I'm like mad about it. And I'm like, so Xenos comes back to life. Okay. There's a very famous clip. If you haven't seen it, you need to clip it. We'll link it for you. Okay. And it's very good. You haven't seen it?
I have not seen it.
We got to get him the clip. We got to get the clip. Hold on. Let me get it.
Okay. Sure. You want me to play it on stream too?
Yeah, you can. I'm going to link it to you.
All right. I got to be careful with this kind of window cropping stuff. Let's see.
All right. It's coming up in our chat.
All right. And I see that chat without messing up everything. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not messing up anything. I'm doing really good. All right. Then if I hold here. Well, hold on a second. I got to make sure. Did you do any of the ad incentive stuff with Twitch?
Yes.
Okay, so it might be. I'm waiting for it because we have it on the channel, but I've been trying to control it, but it doesn't let me control it as well as I think it does, and we are getting kind of close to that point to where it wants to run something. Screw it. We're gonna go for it. All right. Let's see. I need to crop this out. All right. I'm in studio mode, so I'm not completely screwing up anything. Have you ever messed up your stream and showed stuff on there you shouldn't have?
Oh yeah. Oh man, the number of VODs who have died because of that. I once showed my credit card information on stream, man. It
Are
was a
you
bad day.
serious?
Yeah, it was a bad day.
How
I
did
was
you?
going through a phase where I had a stalker and I showed my credit card information and address at the same time. It was the worst time of my life.
That is
It was so
horrible.
unfortunate.
I am so sorry. That's like literally my deep fear. Is that I'm going to mess up something and then someone's going to come and just completely ruin my actual life. All right, hold on. I think I have it on there. I'm going to switch over to it. All right. I'm going to turn this up so I can hear it okay.
This as well.
Oh, hold on. Here we go. I had the
This
video.
is so dumb.
Mhm.
Maybe you want to bring back Gaius as well. This is so dumb.
I'm just going to keep playing it.
Maybe you want to bring back
You-
Gaius as
Just
well.
play it over and over again.
This is so dumb.
The infamous
Maybe you want
Gaius
to bring
moment.
back Gaius.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead. Let me know when you're
I'm transitioning. I'm going back. All right. Go ahead.
So I was mad. I was like I didn't even think right. I just referred to the least likely villain that could possibly come back. It hadn't even like never in a million years would have occurred to me that he wouldn't be dead or would come back. Right. That was my go-to example. And then
Yeah.
here's to tie this back to your original point about theorizing and the community coming together to figure things out between expansions.
Yeah.
We get to a man in a desert who I called Clint.
Oh, okay.
I called him Clint because he looked like Clint Eastwood. He had a
Mhm.
cool voice. He was all alone, very manly. He talked like this. It's like, all right, we got a guy named Clint. And I had no idea what I was dealing with. And then there's the follow-up clip that I can show if you want. The follow-up
Sure.
clip where, if maybe my stream can link it, where I find out that it's Gaius. And I'm just fucking stun locked out of my mind. Had no idea what he says, right? He says, would you rather call me Gaius or something Van Belser? And I was like, why would I call you either of those things? He's dead. Oh, would you rather call me the Black Wolf? I'm like, no, I'm not going to call you that. And Chat, but in the meantime, and this is coming back to the original point, Chat in the meantime is like, he's got the same weapon, he's got the same move sets, he's got the same attacks. And I'm like, okay, well, you guys spent 2 years or whatever theorizing about who this man was, tracking down the references. Meanwhile, to me, he died yesterday.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people who follow the Final Fantasy 14 lore caught it like immediately. It was one of those
Yeah.
things. And same thing with a handful of characters and stuff. Just we have some really, really amazing lore junkies that can pretty much tell you everything and how they expect it to pan out. And they can get about 75% of it at least right. But man, yeah, I'm thinking back when I saw
I'm
that.
experiencing that a little bit now with what's happening with the 6.2 speculation. But at the time, like that would happen constantly. Like something would shock me out of my seat. Which I would be like, oh, but if you had spent 6 months thinking about it like we did, you would have noticed this tiny little mask on his belt or something,
Yeah. Yep. Oh man, but now you're in that seat, right? You're in
now I'm in that seat. I'm experiencing the speculation now. Now I'm with you guys, wondering what happens next.
What do you think's going to happen next?
I don't know. I mean, I was fairly confident we were going to the 13th. That seems to be confirmed. The best speculation I have, the most interesting things I think I have to say, which probably isn't very interesting, and others have said, is that if you've done because again, this was all merged together for me, right? I did the Shadowbringer role quests, like a day before I did 6.1 stuff. So I had just done the role quests, which have us meet and talk with Scylla and Knuckle High about creating portals to the 13th because they want to go back to their homeland and redeem it and see if anyone can be saved. And then the next day I do 6.1, which is about our dragon friend Vritra trying to go to the 13th to find his sister. And I'm like, wow, are those going to tie together? Maybe she'll be involved. And now in the trailer, we hear a woman talking. Could it be her? Are they going to tie it back to Scylla? That's the best I got. I don't have a lot of speculation. I'm still like a lore baby, but That's probably the most interesting thought I have, is that it would be cool if they brought back Unukalhai and Scylla and tied them in some way.
If it makes you feel any better, you're probably way past me in lore because I've forgotten a lot of things by now. You know, it's been so long that things have just completely left my brain. Like, you know, Graha was such a big thing for a lot of people. They showed a trailer when we were going into Shadowbringers, and they showed the kind of outline of that character, and like half the people were like, "Oh, that's Graha Tia." I'm like, "Who the hell is Graha Tia?"
That's one of the ones that I actually did catch. Going into Shadowbringers, I had just, because again my mods, I had just done all the Crystal Tower stuff, you know, a couple of weeks before, or a couple of days before, I don't remember. And we have this guy, and we get teleported from the tower. This also looks like the tower. He starts making these very sussy references. I'm like, I think that's Graha. And then chat being chat, they think they're so smart. They want to convince you that you're wrong so that you can still have so that you can still be surprised. And they're like, streamer, where's his tail? I'm like, guys, you're just convincing me I'm right. If you try too hard to convincing me I'm wrong, it makes me think I'm right. And so that was one I actually caught.
Did they not spam smiles for you?
No. They were. I think some of them spammed smiles. That was a thing that was enforced by my chat. But I think 2 or 3 times when I would speculate about something and I'd be too close to the truth, they would try to convince me I was wrong, you know? Instead of smiling. A little bit of a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, you can't control it. It's like a reaction.
It is what it is. Of course. Of course.
But man, yeah, you know, for some reason, when I thought bringing on a professional MMO raider, I didn't think that I would spend like already 40 minutes talking about the main story quest for Final Fantasy 14.
I loved this story. It was so good. I could go on for hours about it, and in fact, I have. You know, on my own stream. So,
I mean, maybe
I'm
one
not surprised
day
you're surprised.
We'll do another lore episode, and we'll bring you on, and you can talk about it.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think a lot of people are kind of interested also in your opinions on rating everything. We did talk a little bit about it. And we talked about how it is kind of funny that you stopped playing the game because of Final Fantasy 14 rating, and then you started playing again and loving the game
for the exact same reason. Yep.
Yeah. But that's just because of the experience going into it, right?
It's the experience of being plugged in and having no idea how to play and sucking at it because you have no idea how to play, versus being part of a team of, you know, your same beginner level and playing with them. That's a very different experience. And one is kind of set up in a way to make you not enjoy it, particularly because, let's admit it, a lot of Final Fantasy 14 mechanics are extremely unique to MMOs. You know, I would call what you call snapshotting and what regular people call horrific lag a fairly unique mechanic that takes some adjustment to.
Yeah. I think Final Fantasy 14, I mean, there's benefits in all of this stuff. Like, I used to, back in my day with WoW, I did Karazhan and I did a handful of those raids, but we never did anything really too aggressive. It was always with friends doing those raids, and I was used to that kind of style raiding. And I got into Final Fantasy 14. I'm like, man, I want a big castle that I go in and I do stuff with, but it was just going into an instance and fighting a boss.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about that a lot, because one of the things people don't like about WoW is trash. You know, why do I want to fight trash for an hour in order to fight a boss? And you see in modern guilds, all they do is skip it. But it is interesting, that point you make, because in WoW, the raids usually are this assault by a small band of adventurers on a huge citadel of the enemy. And trash gives that ambiance, you know, in a way that Final Fantasy never has.
Yeah, in Final Fantasy 14, I think, you know, they did try a little bit in the very beginning raids with coils. You'll see some of that trash in there, and then they just moved away from it. And I mean, that being said, I'm guessing you haven't done BA, have you?
Correct. That's the thing at the end of Eureka, right? I just hit level 20 in Eureka last week.
Okay. I haven't done it, to be fair. I've watched it. I've seen people try to clear it. It actually became something that I actually tracked. Was it that or something else that I can't even remember the world race stuff that I tracked anymore. But it was one of those things we expected people just to clear the next day. And it turned out not to be completely that scenario, where it just turned into this huge community coming together. It was such a weird experience. for that, because there was no group that was really made to handle it, and so data centers just came together to clear these fights because there was so many people and they just didn't know how to handle it in Final Fantasy XIV. And so those were really interesting experiences. I don't know if we'll have anything like that again. If we have another big raid, it will likely be a big group that knows what they're doing going into it. They tried that with DR2, but I'm guessing you haven't gotten to that one yet.
DR2?
DR Savage. A 2 is a TO.
No,
yeah.
I did the regular version of DR. DR Savage is on my list of Final Fantasy school things to do in the upcoming month.
Yeah. That was so bad that when I started tracking it, I didn't know what a group was called, and I called them Aether Group 2, and now the people who led that group spitefully call their name Aether Group 2, Aether Group 3, and 4, and everything else. But it's interesting because Final Fantasy XIV does that sometimes where they want to experience in these raid concepts. What would it look like in Final Fantasy XIV, right? Besides the 8-man raid. They're used to doing that, and they stick with that formula, but they do dive out of it every once in a while for fun. And that's when we see stuff like BA and DRS. But, you know, if it's really good, it's going to continue in some way.
Yeah.
But
and I think the consensus by most people is that you know, trash isn't interesting. You know, you can
bring it back.
It's just uninteresting, right? Like most people's consensus is that I want to fight the boss. The boss has the interesting mechanics. The boss is why I'm here. Trash, kind of keeping you away from it, is like a relic of an old MMO system where, in order to earn the right to have the fun of fighting the boss, you have to go through all of these other hoops, and that's just one more hoop. So while I do think that there's some role-playing justifications for some of it when you're trying to create this ambiance of a gigantic fortress, which maybe I'll see in BA, I don't know. It isn't something that most people enjoy. And I would never advocate for it to be larger in Final Fantasy. The one thing that might be interesting, it's weird that in Final Fantasy, you never even close to feel like you're in that Citadel outside of like Alliance raids, right? You queue up for turn 1, you kill a boss, you leave. You queue up for turn 2, you don't journey through Pandemonium, you know? Yeah. That might be interesting to do.
We were kind of hoping that it'd be something like that when we were seeing the previews for Pandemonium way back in the day, and they're showing screenshots and walking around, and we're like, hey, this looks like the entryway to like a kind of castle dungeon area. And of course it didn't. It was a hopeful speculation that they would have a little bit of fun with it, but no, I kind of miss it, but you are right. It would get old if you had to do trash all the time.
And you would just try to skip it and blast it as fast as you could. I'd speak from experience here. All you do is skip it.
But I mean, now you just kind of jump into a fight and you just kind of attack it and and go through those mechanics, do this dance. That's what Final Fantasy XIV raiding really is. It's some sort of dance between 8 players with a few kind of 50-50. Every once in a while, they'll do like 3 different options for what might happen. But figuring that out is the fun part, which is why
figuring it out is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's enough of a dance. I love blind progression. It is so much fun, and figuring that out is very fun. But the thing that they do really, really well, not everyone loves blind progression. In fact, I would argue most likely the data will show that very few people do. You would rather watch a video, learn how to do it. And the thing is these fights are, like you say, a dance that is sufficiently intricate and aesthetically pleasing that executing it is also really, really fun. You know, there's lots of examples of this, right? When you do Lights Rampant or Lions Rampant right, it looks pretty and feels satisfying. When you do the Nidhogg phase, I will go to my deathbed saying that the Nidhogg phase of DSR is possibly the most satisfying, aesthetically well-designed phase I've ever encountered in any PvE encounter ever, in terms of feeling really good to execute right. And like, it doesn't matter if you do it blind or not. It doesn't matter if you're figuring it out or not, because it's difficult, challenging, and yet feels amazing to perform well. So that even if you don't like blind progression, you still glow after you do that well. It feels good.
Yeah. I don't think we'll ever have another fight like DRS or DSR. Yeah, DS. Sorry, getting all mixed up here. We'll never have another fight like that, I don't think, with Final Fantasy XIV. I think that's their peak. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how they can produce that again. They spent years on that.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's a masterpiece of a fight, right? In terms of storytelling, tying in to the MSQ, tying into the cinematic moments of the story, the cinematic moments of the fight, the incredibly well executed mechanics, the difficulty level. If it's the best PV encounter I've ever played, which it is, then it would not be a condemnation of their team for them to never equal it again.
Right.
It can't always be perfect.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely not. It's just a realization by me. It's like seeing that and thinking, well, I'm going to be honest with you. When Shadowbringers came out, I was like, well, that's pretty much it. It just has to go downhill from here. There's nowhere else to go. But they kept it pretty good with Endwalker. I mean, Shadowbringers holds a special place, but Endwalker does too, to me. And so, I mean, there is a chance that they'll create something like that again, but I don't think they're ever going to have that difficulty in this game. I think they're gonna try to lower that down a little bit because there's so many story elements. You didn't know anything about the story when you first attempted it, right?
No, when we started DSR, I was still in I have done none of the story. I've skipped everything. I have no idea who these people are, these locations are. And then what happened was we started playing through it. Got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and I'm like, to me, if the story coming from my background, it felt Shakespearean, it really truly did. We had a scene setting, and then we had Act 1, and we had Act 2, we had Act 3. The queuing up part told us that you're gonna try to change history and save some dude. Who the fuck knows who this guy is? I don't know. And so I was like, so we have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. They're telling us how it's happened, and then they're gonna have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 telling us how it might go if we save him. I'm like, this is super cool storytelling. It's like Shakespearean. Who the hell wrote this? Did they write other things? They wrote the story of the game? All right. So one night, as I talk about how Shakespearean and awesome this is, and how it's weird that I don't have any idea what's going on, just the structure of a play, I'm like, should I play the MSQ? I guess I should. And chat's like, yes, do it right now. And I'm like, all right, fuck it. I've got time. I started a character and I started it. Mm-hmm. And then the funny thing is people are like, I wonder if you'll finish Heavensward before they finish DSR. I mean, and are you going to stop with Heavensward? And we get to Heavensward. I learn who this guy is while we're fighting. I learn who Harshfont is. Mm-hmm. Still don't realize that's the guy in the fight. I go in the next day. I see the day after Harshfont dies. I see we're on that bridge. This is where he died? That's where this fight is set? Oh my God, the trauma. And then we go into Thor, and everything started being so new and fresh. And then this is actually Harshfont. He's dying in front of me the same way he died in the MSQ. And now we're trying to prevent him from dying in order to change history. It just hit so different.
Man, that character in particular had memorials at FanFest events. Set up like by players. They would come by and put little candles and pictures of him over in like a corner somewhere. It is just coming from a long-term time Final Fantasy 14 player. This fight was outstandingly like emotional to go through.
I can only imagine what it was like. Like the thing that make this so amazing to me is that this ultimate experience that the players were experiencing as I started the World Race, to the extent that they streamed it. Some of them did, right? Some teams were streaming. It had to have become, I can only imagine, but it had to have become almost a community event, as thousands of people who experienced this in their MSQs are now watching and experiencing these cinematic phases occur with the players. And that has to be just the most amazing community thing to do.
Yeah, and it absolutely, World Race is always like a big community event. This one was a huge one, for sure. But because we don't get that insight into the fights, which is going to change with this upcoming raid a little bit, because we'll be able to do the normal mode 1 week before Savage mode comes out. But it's always been an adventure for people to see what these fights look like, and then get that secret Savage part at the very end. That's only there for people who are able to make it up to that point. And everyone just watches because they want to see what happens next. And then what we have is we have the World Race memers who will put little pictures of cats or just random things on their Twitter while they're racing, just to fuck with everybody.
True.
And it's interesting how the World Race for Final Fantasy 14 works, because it is a big thing where the top players don't stream. They just don't. Yep. And it really does make sense for Final Fantasy XIV, although it's very profitable to stream. And Final Fantasy XIV might change one day.
It
With
might,
that.
but there are a couple of severe barriers to it.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that it's so puzzle based makes it really difficult to feel confident about showing your strategy and what those mechanics are, while people have players who are just analyzing the fight and out there looking for content that might show the next piece so they can get their team ahead. And so it's rough. And Savage is a little bit different because it goes by so fast.
It does. Very fast.
Ultimate, you really don't like. If you want to win, it's not going to happen likely if you're streaming.
I don't know about that. WoW went through the same thing, right? There was this phase of if you stream, you're going to lose. You're going to show people, they're going to be able to catch up. They're going to copy your strat and like riding behind the head biker and stuff like that. But it turned out to not be the case. I know that Final Fantasy, let's say, that they are a little bit more puzzle based, and seeing something lets you solve it and it's not as mechanically heavy. Let's make that argument. Maybe. I'm not sure if I agree with it, but let's make that argument.
Okay.
I don't know if it's as impactful as we think. And I don't think that's the biggest barrier to streaming. I think that some teams were on the verge of being willing to stream Savage, like almost there.
They are.
And then plugins.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. If you want to compete for World First, you are going to have logs. If you want to compete for World First, there are certain plugins you are going to use. And if you are afraid that you are going to be brigaded and then banned because of that, because let's face it, plugin policy is only enforced against streamers, you're not going to stream because it's more important to you that you win the race. And that to me is the biggest barrier, is that we have this policy about plugins that causes streamers to be afraid to use them, which means that World First Racers won't stream, which means we won't stream the World First Race.
Yeah.
And it's a hard conundrum because you do want to prevent the use of very bad plugins, like some of ones we've seen recently, evidence of just straight up freaking cheating.
Yeah.
While there are others that legitimate racers are going to feel like they have to use, like logs, and that probably I don't think Square would actually object to if they had a more discerning policy. It's a hard thing to deal with. And the unfortunate side effect of this difficult decision making is that streamers are the ones that get punished for plugins, which means that World First Racers will not stream.
Yeah.
If that weren't there, I think World First teams would probably start streaming already. I really do.
Well, so when we think about, I guess, plugins for Final Fantasy XIV, what are the plugins that help people? It's usually DPS and looking at logs. You don't technically have to put that on stream, though, right? I mean,
That's true.
The UI ones are the ones that...
Those are the bigger ones. And there's a couple of those that are huge, right? Just as this is a great example, I think. And there's ways around it, but they'll slow you down. Debuff timers on party frames. Okay. Yeah. This is a crucial piece of data that tabletop games from 50 years ago, when you roll the dice, will tell you how long your debuff lasts. But for whatever reason, we don't have debuff timers on our default party list in Final Fantasy. And you can get around it by everyone screenshotting and saying, okay, mine was 18 and mine was 12 and mine was 3, but that's going to slow you way the fuck down compared to just taking a screenshot or looking at your VOD and saying, I've got a plugin that shows them all and they're right here. And that's going to speed up your progression on any fight which involves debuffs. Like, for example, you got, I don't know, the every fight ever.
yeah.
And if that's you can't put that off screen. That's right there on your screen. And if you stream World First Final Fantasy, you've got 10,000 people watching. They see that. 1,000 of them are going to report you to Square. And then because Square has this policy, they're going to ban you. So you're not going to stream. That's what's preventing the streaming. Because those kinds of plugins are the kind of functionality that I would argue are baseline, necessary, and borderline mandatory for an MMO in 2022 that World First Raiders are going to use, because not doing so would be deliberately handicapping themselves, and they can't stream themselves doing it.
That's true. I can see that. Absolutely. That does provide a... I was trying to think of the other... That's a huge advantage, being able to see that. Let me think. I think that's the only one I can think of, though, outside of... Like, the debuff timers are extremely important, but what other mechanics Final Fantasy XIV, just by basic UI and changes, would give you an advantage?
I would say that the logs, which you're right, don't have to be on screen, and the debuff timers are probably the biggest ones.
Okay. And, I mean, damage, just looking to see... Well, I don't know.
Logs give you all of that data. Like why you
Yeah.
died, it's on the logs.
Yeah,
What's doing
it's all there.
damage, it's on the logs. What kind of damage, physical or like that one's really important. Because when they did the plugins, Fufara, Echo decided we're gonna market ourselves as using 0 plugins for DSR, which by the way was miserable because some mitigation in this game doesn't work on some kinds of damage, and the log doesn't tell you what you got hit by. You know,
Yep.
so, but by log I mean the in-game combat log. So we're like,
Right.
is this physical? I don't know, but a log tells you it's physical, right?
Yep.
So logs give you all of the data you need. It's unbelievably valuable.
Yeah.
I can't really think of many other plugins that people would be like, I need to have this and yet I can't show it. But those would be the big ones. Now, there's always the possibility that there are less legitimate things being used because we've seen examples of that lately.
Oh yeah.
I obviously give the top teams the benefit of the doubt. I don't think anyone's using that. But those are the kinds of things that should be against the rules and penalized.
Yeah.
Those guys are never going to stream anyway, right? You don't have to.
Yeah.
The fact that those came out in the first place is hilarious and a mistake.
No, yeah, those kind of things. Square Enix does do some things to try to, I don't know if they try to break plugins. I guess maybe they do have some level of resources devoted towards breaking plugins like that when they do a patch for Savage or anything else. But with this, we're gonna have a week for people to really mess with that data. I mean, they could do some stuff to kind of hide the information and things that you need that would be related to these kind of different plugins that would give you those advantages. But I don't know. We'll see. If you don't know, I'm very invested in Final Fantasy XIV's World Race, and
me too. I think it deserves a World First Race. I think it would be huge and awesome.
I mean, it's not near the level of what WoW has. It's not near the level of some other games. But having professional teams that are sponsored in the World Race would be pretty good. That'd be pretty nice.
Yep. I agree.
But it does make it very tricky because very competitive teams will, like you said, use plugins, and Square Enix won't support them in any way, shape, or regard.
Yeah. So they won't stream. And there is also, I don't want to diminish or minimize the fact that there's a very real fear that if we stream, we might have an advantage and lose it because someone covers our strats. That's a fear. I just think it's one that we got over in WoW, and it turned out to not really be a problem. And I think that's probably true here as well. And I get the sense that teams were on the verge of doing it until I really think that that's the issue. But yeah, it's a conundrum that we can't solve on our side.
Yeah, Savage is completely different in that regard, because if you're stopping to like look and try to do someone else's strat, it could throw you off a lot if you're already kind of in a groove and you have a strat that will work. And I mean, not entirely, I guess, but that there is that consideration to trying to copy someone else's work isn't going to work for your group as well. I mean,
there are some solutions that I think may be being worked on. Right, we got hints recently. Joshi P did an interview saying that I read a translation of saying that we're working on UI upgrades, and a lot of the plugins that people use are UI related. If those got created to be baseline, they wouldn't need to use those UI changes, and then maybe the barrier would sort of vanish on its own.
Yeah. So you know what? There is something I wanted to talk to you outside. Of course, get into World Race stuff with you. And away from rating in general, there were some general rating questions I wanted to ask you. One of them being kind of, I guess this goes into it pretty well, but you said you stepped down from WoW rating.
Yes, I have.
Now, that was just, hey, I'm not going to do WoW rating this tier or the next tier, or just done.
So this was... the answer is very simple. I'm done with World of Warcraft.
Okay.
And the process of coming to that decision was, a long, thoughtful process. It was not impulsive. It was over the course of months. But it's extremely common for World First Racers to be done at some point, right? It's playing WoW at that level, getting World First is way more than a full-time job. It is an unbelievable amount of time. For every hour of the good stuff you get of doing actual progression in the raid, you spend, and I'm not exaggerating, like 100 hours of doing garbage. Just absolute unfun, miserable, life-destroying garbage. And for years, it was worth it to me, right? That fun in the progression was so much fun, and the garbage was so meaningless to me that it was fine. It was worth it to me. But for the past 2 tiers, it's become less and less worth it to me. The only reason I was playing anymore for the past 2 tiers was because I was having fun with my friends. I loved playing with my friends. And because that 1 or 2 weeks of actual progression was intense, amazing fun. I've told you before, right? That process of solving a fight, doing the fight, winning the fight is pure sex to me. I am addicted to that. But when an addict, when an addict has only one source for something, he'll do anything for it. Yeah, I'll do Torghast. I'll do Islands. I'll do World Quest. This is the only place I can get my drug. But now I find Final Fantasy, and it's free almost. I don't have to do Torghast. I don't have to do Islands. They give me crafted gear at the beginning of the tier, and I go fight bosses right away. Why would I do all that other garbage? I'm done with it. I quit. Goodbye.
So Final Fantasy rating killed WoW for you.
It did. Yes.
Okay. All right. And that is a extremely big argument that people have when they're comparing Final Fantasy 14 to WoW. Everything else is that it's so easily accessible to get into rating for Final Fantasy 14. It's not. You get 8 people together. The gear is pretty much there for you, especially this tier when they have a week to obtain it. There's nothing that stops you from getting into it.
Barriers to entry are just, they're not there, and it's glorious. And why should there be any? It just doesn't make sense. If I want to do X, if I want to run a race, IRL, then I should run in order to get ready for the race. I should practice running. Maybe do a little light weightlifting, eat well, but most of what I'm going to do is run. I'm not going to weave baskets or or craft tires or build chairs or dig up rocks on islands. Why are you gatekeeping the running with all this other stuff that I don't want? And Final Fantasy doesn't have the gates, so it's better and it's glorious.
Are you mostly sticking to healer for Final Fantasy 14?
So this upcoming tier was kind of like tumultuous to plan for because I decided, I want to be competitive in Final Fantasy. It's an amazing game. And there wasn't a lot of time. So I put out some feelers. I talked to some statics. It wasn't clear if Echo was going to participate. I ended up talking to a couple of statics at various competitive levels, ranging from top 5 to like top 30 or 40. And it's hard to convince competitive teams to take a risk on me, except as a healer. Right. I have healed at a world first level for a very long time in World of Warcraft, and I've healed in this game in blind progression and savages and half of an ultimate. But I haven't done DPS, I haven't done dinging. I don't really have credibility to say that I'm going to do anything else. So yes, because of that, I am still in healer jail. Now I am ending up going to go ahead and play with Echo. Echo did end up deciding that they're going to play together in 6.2 because of the short notice. I was like, let's screw all of that other mumbo jumbo. I'll worry about it later. Postpone these decisions. Play with Echo. And in Echo, I will continue to play healer because ain't no one else willing to do it.
Healing in Final Fantasy 14 is a lot different than WoW.
It's very different. It is very different. That is true.
Do you like the difference?
So if you ask me to say whether healing in WoW or in Final Fantasy is more fun, the answer is clearly, and I don't think there's much argument for me, because fun is subjective, WoW. WoW healing is more complicated, it is more involved, it is more interesting, and to me, it is more fun. However, healing in Final Fantasy is still really fun for me. I enjoy healing. I play support in every game I ever play. I'll bitch about being in healer jail, but I like healing. There's something about playing support that feels good. Saving lives feels good. Making a difference in whether our team lives or dies feels good. And Final Fantasy still has all of that. In fact, to a certain degree, more, because heals in Final Fantasy are so powerful. You immediately see, look at their health. They just went from nothing to full because I pushed Macrocosmos or Lilybell. It feels great. So I would say that I don't like the differences. I think WoW healing is better, more interesting, and more fun. But Final Fantasy healing is still really fun. And I sense the second part of this is just because I think one is better doesn't mean I think the other should change. I think a lot of the aspects that make Final Fantasy healing less interesting to me are deliberate with good reasons.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, when they come into Final Fantasy 14, they think why is it that the goal is to heal less and do more DPS overall? And I don't know how much WoW plays a part in doing that. I don't know what the state of WoW is with healers.
It's
and doing
hard for
damage.
me to answer that too, because if you're trying to get world first, every single person in the team is doing the most damage you can.
Right.
Theoretical min-maxing of an encounter is you do the bare minimum amount of healing necessary to keep every person alive, and then every single other global cooldown is devoted to damage. That's true in Final Fantasy of healers, and it's true in World of Warcraft and healers. At levels outside of world first, the game is forgiving enough that I don't think healers need to devote that much time doing damage. And that's also, to be honest, true of Final Fantasy. So I can't really answer how different it is. To me, it's basically the same. You're trying to do as much damage as you can. The big differences are that in WoW, the developers, the game designers, put way more damage events into the encounters. Damage is happening all the time in multiple different ways. You have sustained damage on tanks that need to be addressed. You have sustained raid damage pulsing every few seconds on all kinds of people. And then you have unpredictable damage happening to unpredictable targets all of the time. So you are almost always pushing healing globals, not because you don't want to do damage, but because if you don't, people will die. Whereas in Final Fantasy, damage events are just very, very rare. You know, it's even in something like DSR, you're pushing healing buttons way less frequently, which means you just have more time to push damage buttons instead. There's two factors that kind of coalesce to create what I would call the quote-unquote problem, the reason why Final Fantasy healing is less interesting. And I'm not saying anything new here. Ask any top healer in Final Fantasy, they'll say the same thing. You've probably heard this before. Those two factors are these. First, the fact that most of the interestingness of your buttons is packed into healing buttons means that you should mostly be pushing healing buttons. Healing kits are fun. You have a lot of different ones. They do different things. So because that's the interesting buttons, those are what you should be pushing. But instead, in Final Fantasy, damage is very, very rare, and you don't have to push healing buttons very often. That's one half of the problem. And that would be okay if it weren't for the other half, which is that your DPS kit is mind-numbingly boring. Every single healer has some version of dot and push nuke, right? With tiny little variations, but it is basically all you're doing is pushing 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 2, and that would be fine if it weren't for that other half, which is that mostly you're pushing those damage buttons. So they could solve this if they considered a problem, either by massively increasing the number of damage events that occur, requiring to spend most of your time pushing healing buttons. That would fix it, or making the DPS buttons more fun to push in all kinds of ways. Add a proc that requires you to react to it. Add charges that require, or a cooldown based button, right? You can make things much more interesting just by having one button does damage on a 6-second cooldown, and 1 out of 5 times randomly procs another button that you can push only if it procs, and you also have this filler, right? When you start having things to watch, it becomes more fun. Either of those alone, not a problem. Both of them combined creates this problem of healing being relatively to WoW less interesting. Now, the caveat there is, like I said, I think it's deliberate.
It is.
I think they want healing to be simpler. And if that's the goal, I can't really argue that that's an illegitimate goal. That's a perfectly legitimate goal. There's good reasons for it. It just means that high-end players are going to consider it healer jail and want out.
Yeah. So healing was definitely in a different spot way back in the day, and they did make choices to go in this direction. You had to stack and get hit and accuracy, to be able to hit bosses with damage attacks. So you would sacrifice all this extra bonus stuff on your gear for healing and put stuff on there so when you do damage, you'll actually hit the mob, and you would have to hit the certain cap and everything. You had to change between stances, between damage stance and not being in damage stance. And there's a handful of other things out there too. But they did want to make it simpler. And I think they just want to make sure that there's healers in the game. Yeah.
And they want it to not be too punishing. And I think maybe they even want it to be kind of a beginner level job. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that be the case where you have a learning position in the team.
Yeah. This is another thing that's kind of funny to me. How many healers out there do you start with level 1 in Final Fantasy XIV?
I don't know.
It's white mage.
1? It's white mage, right?
Yeah,
it's only
yeah. Although it's with jobstones and everything else, whatever it's called before, I forget. Well, I don't know why I'm blanking on that, but yeah, you don't really get a lot of options starting out in this game as a healer. You get it as you start to level up. You can switch over and stuff. But if you want to start level 1 as a healer, believe that's the only path you can go.
Yeah, I think it's White Mage. And then the next one would be like going Conjure and being Summoner at level something, 20 maybe?
Yeah.
Not Summoner, a Scholar.
Yeah, well, yeah, you'd be Scholar from Arcanist, right? And you go from Thaumaturge to whatever.
I'm sorry, yeah, Arcanist.
Yeah. And then like everything else goes into like level 30, then 50, and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
They probably need to fix that. I mean, that's getting into the base leveling design and the entry level or entry experience going into Final Fantasy XIV, which they have improved a lot. It was a lot rougher to start this game back in the day. But they made a whole bunch of changes to speed it up.
There was I feel like, so the Final Fantasy community, especially the MSQ watching community, is a coven of emotional vampires, constantly looking for a new streamer upon which to feed. And they're terrified. They're just terrified that each new streamer will quit. And so there's like this trepidation involved when a streamer starts ARR and constant reassurances, guys, ARR may suck, but it's going to get better. Don't worry, it's going to get better. Please don't quit. We need someone upon which to feed. And to me, it was so funny because I think most of those players must have played before, like you're talking, when it was longer and a harder thing. And there's been this rework after which we're playing, and it's really not that bad, guys. It's okay. I wasn't going to quit. Everything was fine. It was relatively smooth sailing. Everything was interesting. I enjoyed the story. The dungeons were clear. None of this bad stuff you were so worried was going to make me quit happened because of this rework. And it was, to me, it's amazing that, and you saw it again with the live letter the other day. They keep going back and continuing to improve that entry-level player experience. Big props.
So that is funny. I never really talked about it that way, but there is the Twitch community for Final Fantasy XIV. There is a huge set of just main story quest watchers. I never really thought about that, but that's a huge thing with Final Fantasy XIV now. And that probably jumped up as hard as it did with Aspen and everything else last year. And just watching new streamers come in became so addicting. People wanted to see those emotions and just suck like all of that energy away from them and absorb it. That's a perfect
Feed us
description.
Your tears. Validate my sorrow and grief.
Relate to me and my experiences with this game and my feelings towards the story. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV players that are really invested in the story are a completely different beast. There are some that get so deep in that hole that they get mad at you for talking bad about a character.
Oh, believe me, I know. Oh my God. Oh.
I've been blocked. I've been blocked multiple times because I said, oh, there's a chance that maybe Thancred dies at some point in the story. And they're like, no, I can't do this anymore. You are an asshole. You shouldn't be talking this way. And it's just, I don't get it.
Yeah. You'll have a take sometimes that doesn't agree with their take about the relative goodness, badness, or validity of a certain scene. And they will get just infuriated, just so angry.
Yeah. Well, that being said, besides healer in Final Fantasy XIV, have you had a chance to play a lot of other roles and jobs?
Yeah. So before, when I was just playing as a story skipper, I almost said scory stipper. On my old character, I leveled a dancer just to experience a DPS, and that was really fun. The DPS jobs in this game, and dancer I think would universally be considered one of the less interesting and easier of the jobs, but it's really fun if all of you have ever played is Malefic Mage.
Okay.
And then that was on the old character. That was fun. And then making Robin, because I was going into Heavensward, because of various factors, I was like, I think Dragoon looks cool. I made him a Dragoon. He's canonically a Dragoon main. I played all the way through as Dragoon. It was really fun. And in order to do the role quests, I also have a bunch of jobs now that aren't healers, right? I have Dragoon for DPS, physical, dancer for ranged, Dark Knight for tank, summoner for caster. I might be forgetting something. I don't know. So at this point, I have played a bunch of DPS jobs as well as a tank job. And I'll be honest, they are amazing. I think Square's done an amazing job of both differentiating and creating these niches of fun within each of these DPS jobs that equals or exceeds anything WoW does with DPS classes, right? Whereas I will say unabashedly and without embarrassment that WoW healing is more interesting and complex than Final Fantasy healing. Final Fantasy DPS is on par or better than WoW DPS. It is extremely interesting, well differentiated, and good.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. I mean, some of the long-term players in these jobs might say things different, just because they're so used to it.
Of course,
yeah. But yeah, there's when we talked about like melee and everything, and getting the directional stuff and trying to get used to all of that. Some people get annoyed with that.
The key to not being bothered by positionals is to ignore them. It's true. Just not even. Who cares? It's like 20 potency, whatever. I don't give a shit.
yeah. That is a good point. Just who cares? Most of the fights in Final Fantasy XIV, you don't need 100% perfect damage to clear it. You need good DPS usually in the early days before you start getting that gear from the raid. But you can make some pretty unoptimal decisions and still get it clear pretty quickly on a raid.
Yeah. In Savage especially, and even to a lesser extent in Ultimates, right? We're doing that DSR progression, and you can make mistakes, you can have a death, you can still do it. You can certainly miss a positional or two and still make these DPS checks. I understand that previously it was way more punishing. You would lose procs, you would lose combos. That would probably be infuriating. But with my playthrough being literally the Summer Dragoon being my first experience with positionals, like I read them and I was like, okay, yeah, obviously I'll try to do it. If it's free, I'll get it. I'll push through North every now and then. But if I don't get it, I'm not going to stress or lose hair over it. I don't care. It just doesn't seem to matter very much. That's my life's tip for melee players. Don't worry about it.
Oh man. Okay. I'll remember that too. I'm gonna let you know I was part of a event for the virtual fan fest where I was competing. It was Heidelin versus Zodiark. We were teams. One was Team Heidelin, one was Team Zodiark. And I was, we were trying to clear fights as quickly as possible. And the person who cleared it first, everything, our team lost horribly. We had a lot of fun, against this other team, but, we definitely lost. And I was chosen to play a job I wasn't familiar with, which was Samurai. And I had no comprehension of their positionals at all. And I was just like, whatever, we're just going to go with it. I'm glad they didn't actually show shots of my screen that much. Because I'm sure I would have been shit talked so much.
Yeah. Oh man, that's actually another barrier to streaming the World First Race that WoW Guilds had to get over, is that idea that, man, when you mess up, it's going to be on stream. People are going to talk about it. People are going to laugh about it. It's going to tilt me. Sometimes you play bad, especially when you're learning a new encounter and you're focusing 90% of your brain on not screwing up the mechanics, and your buttons are just all over the place. I did that a ton while streaming and playing through just the leveling quests, and you do these trials and raids as part of the leveling. And I'm playing Dragoon with this ridiculous 10-button long combo, and I'm like, what did I just push? I don't even know. I guess we start over. Just imagine people watching. He's like, he just started his combo over again. He's never going to get Heaven's Thrust pushed ever,
What you do is you just, sometimes you hide chat with a window. You just do that with your hotbar.
Yeah.
And you're okay.
That's what my UI is like. My hotbar doesn't show anything except actual cooldowns that I need to track. Combos, you can't see them.
Nice.
Malefic, you can't see it. Nothing without a cooldown is visible anywhere. You can't tell if I'm making a mistake. And the keybinds still aren't on the screen. They're off on the hidden bars, because that's what makes it easy for me to set up the UI across multiple jobs. All you see are these buttons with no keybinds in the middle showing cooldowns. Criticize me now, chat.
I couldn't do it. I have to see it. But oh man. Okay. I do want to ask him other stuff that's not rating of you too, because recently you just watched a live letter. It was your first experience to be able to watch a live letter and be again kind of up to date with the status of the game, with everything that's going on. Actually, the timing of that I think works well for you, doesn't it? Because you wake up pretty early anyways, or am I okay?
I start stream every day at the exact time they started their live letter. It was perfect.
Yeah. Well, what was that experience like? Kind of going through and seeing that and seeing him hold up, I'm sure, holding up pieces of paper.
I was talking about that earlier today. It's 2022 and you guys are making a video game. and you're
Mhm.
holding up pieces of paper to show your graphical designs as though it's 1901 or something. It was very funny. But now, of course, this community
Mhm.
being the omega, in love with the developers that they are, they would be mad if they changed it.
Oh,
Now it's
absolutely.
this cute, endearing thing that we need this. You can't change that. I want to see my pieces of paper. It's so cute when he holds them up.
Yep. Yep. That's
But to me, it was funny and like bizarre. What is he doing? He just put it on the screen.
yeah. These guys are rock stars. They're the rock stars developers. We don't really have that as much anymore. We used to have that. It's starting to kind of fade away a bit, but the Final Fantasy XIV development team, everyone treats them like they're gods in some way, shape, or form, and that's because they've kind of earned a lot of that respect. Yoshida, again, I've met with him a good handful of times, either interviews or working for commentary on their events and stuff, and he's such a cool dude. I love talking to him, and Soken is legitimately a rock star because he produces all the music and he's in a rock band based on the music for Final Fantasy XIV.
I haven't been able to meet any of them, but at various points through my journey through the game, Chad has insisted that I watch various videos. I've seen Yoshi P and Soken do the interview and interviews and talks about when they were talking about the cancer and the discussion that Yoshi P did at the beginning of Endwalker when he was legitimately just heartbroken at the delays, and then obviously the live letter. And even though I don't have years of relationship and emotional investment with this team, it is so easy to see why the relationship between the developers and the community is positive and filled with love. And it's because the developers obviously love the game and love their community, right? That drives that. And it's so clear that emotion, that palpable investment in making it an excellent experience for the people whom they are serving, right? Is so obvious that to me, it's very clear that, yeah, they do deserve that level of reverence and admiration and trust. That's that. And it's especially coming from someone who played World of Warcraft for near on a decade, it's heartwarming and borderline heartbreaking to see that relationship and see oh,
Yeah.
I've been in an abusive relationship and didn't even know it.
I mean, we haven't had that event yet where someone came up and asked the status of phone ownership. So,
right.
So we haven't had to deal with. I mean, it may come. It may come one day. I mean, all good companies,
yeah, of course,
can become villains. Blizzard was one of the most heartbreaking downfalls for me personally. In my opinion of them and everything else. And so
as personnel changes, especially, right? People with that initial investment for whom this is a life's work, as they turn it over to people for whom it is a paycheck, that's a palpable difference.
Absolutely. And I mean, Square Enix might eventually do that with Final Fantasy XIV, but as long as we see Yoshida there and Soken and all of them kind of invested the way they are, it's still very promising, and I don't see, my opinion going and changing at any point. But I'm going to ride it as long as I can. So that being said, watching a live letter and seeing them interact, and they do scripted stuff and they're goofy things.
Of course.
Yeah.
They've got an outline and things to go through, but they had fun, right? They're up there talking about a game that they love, excited about features they're introducing, enjoying themselves. I think a lot of my chat was worried. I think a lot of my chat was scared because I did a day after my MSQ journey where I was like, all right, I'm going to do React content now. Link me videos and I'll watch them. And I think it was traumatic for chat because if I wasn't interested by the first 10 seconds of the video, I skipped it. And I think they were scared that I was going to watch this live letter and be like, this is boring. I'll read for 30 seconds a summary at the end. But it was so endearing. If you only cared about nothing except getting the information you wanted about the upcoming patch, you could read a summary after it for 30 seconds. But it was so cool to see. I haven't skipped any videos in any of my times about the actual producers of the game because I enjoy watching them be excited about the game. That's wholesome and redemptive to me in a way. I almost crave that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so refreshing, right? In the state of the world and everything else. Just seeing that is it takes you away from it for a bit, and it just gives you the warm and cuddly feelings that there's people out there making content like video games and stuff that aren't out to, doesn't seem at least, to completely screw you over. But But okay, well, going through it though, besides the interactions between them and everything else, the content that they announced, was there anything in particular like you're really excited about what you saw on the screen?
Going into it, I'll admit that I was most excited by the hints that they are planning to make UI changes. Because as a healer, UI changes are near and dear to my heart. Because all I do is stare at a UI. I stare at health bars all day. They didn't do that, and I felt a little sad. After coming out of it, the trailer was so good. That trailer was jam-packed. I watched it 3 times. There was so much content in it. I'm sure that the spoiler channels of Discords are filled with 100,000 lines of speculation about each part of the trailer and what's coming up next. That was really exciting to see. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah.
After having decided that I was gonna quit WoW because of islands, I was a little perturbed to see islands coming back into my life. but people seem excited about it. It looks to me, the islands are most comparable to like a survival game, like Ark or Medieval Dynasty. If you've ever played something like that, where you go in naked, you build a tool, the tool mate lets you make more tools, you make buildings, and I've always loved that kind of game. And it looks like it's going to be this. People are worried about, oh man, all anyone is going to do is play their island, right? No one's going to come out of their island. But see, Yoshi P's ahead of us again. You guys saw the raid sets he designed, glowing purple and orange. Those are fucking sick. They did that so that you come out of your islands and do the raid. It's just so obvious. They're 5-heading us again.
Yep. Real quick, just completely unrelated question. Is there any chance you hear my daughter in the background? At all? No? Okay. Because I can hear
okay, maybe when you talk. When your mic cues up, there's a very faint background noise that I wouldn't have thought of, but you pointed it out and now I hear it.
Okay, all right. And I won't, so maybe just like a little bit there, but nothing. Okay.
Tiny bit, but it wouldn't have gotten my attention if you hadn't pointed it out.
God damn it. I messed up. Oh, all right. Yeah, she's a little upset in the room next to me. I'm sure you remember those days.
Yep, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Listen, 5 months old children, yep, they cry. Just wait until you have a 14-year-old. Oh, my Lord.
I can only imagine. Oh, yeah, now I think about it. Oh, I was horrible.
I don't mean to malign my daughter. My daughter is amazing. I have beautiful, intelligent, amazing daughters. The issue is that she's in her head. And so first she'll get like mildly upset about something. And then the fact that she got upset will piss her off.
Hey, I feel that too. You know?
Oh yeah, it's such an adult thing to feel. It's all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, back to Island Sanctuary. Sorry for that.
Yep, back to Islands. Oh God, PTSD. Please don't say back to Islands. I heard that too much.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's interesting because Final Fantasy XIV has a very casual community and a huge casual community, right? And so something like Island Sanctuary is made just for them.
Yeah, I love that. Yoshi P said something like that, right? He's like, not everyone will play this. That's okay. We want this to be a fun, cool thing that some people enjoy, and it's okay that some things are enjoyed by some people. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of, it's a theme park. Final Fantasy XIV is a theme park of content. It has all kinds of different things that you can do. And I'm sure you've seen that. I don't know if you've done much. Have you spent time in Gold Sauce here?
Probably a cumulative of like 2 hours. I wanted the bee's knees dance because RP. Okay, this game is amazing. Very little RMT type things. Very little pay to win, but RP in this game is thoroughly pay to win. We all have to admit that, right?
Yeah.
So I needed some dances and some glowy lights, and I've spent too much money on this game already. So one of my viewers took me by the hand, dragged me from place to place in Gold Saucer. Was like, do this, do that. All right, now do this. Now put these clothes on. Bam! I can buy the bee's knees. That's how long I've spent there.
I mean, there's a statement to be made that all hardcore raiders are really just glamour experts. That
of course
you have to be a hardcore raider to be the top tier glamour player in Final Fantasy XIV.
Of course, and it goes the other way as well, right? Looking good is feeling good is playing good is killing bosses. Our glam is a very vital part of performance at die, and everyone knows this.
Yeah, 100%. But it does seem like, I at least taking a peek at your stream, you are kind of getting into that whole RP scene a little bit, are you?
I am. So if you'll remember Preach's party with Zeppela, it was a huge deal.
Mhm.
And he asked me to go to it. And I said I would, as you
Mhm.
do.
Mhm.
But I was so trepidatious about it, man. I did not want to go. The day of it, I was thinking of excuses. Maybe I'm going to get sick. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to fall. My internet's going to go out. I was trying to come up with excuses. I was convinced to go, and it was so much fun. This was my first ever experience of RP, basically in any game ever. And it was so much fun. And now I'm like, I don't know, probably 60 or 70% RPer and only 30 or 40% Raider anymore. I'm getting all the way into it. It's so cool. I've never experienced a game like this where you actually identify with your character, where people come together in a game in
Mhm.
massive quantities and have fun in the game with each other. And it's, I don't know, it's special and magical and fun.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was when I was just going through my growing up phases where I was playing MMOs and RP stuff, and there was RP servers in WoW, and RP servers still, but it was something that was like, yeah, I would never do any of that kind of stuff. That's kind of weird. And then I'm like such a fan for like Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, RP is not really an uninteresting thing, right? It's actually kind of fun to go in
Yeah.
there and just be that person for a little bit. I haven't done it as much in Final Fantasy XIV, but it makes sense why it exists. People have plays, people have nightclubs, people have so much stuff.
The extent is insane. It's mind-boggling and it's heartwarming. Today, there was the release of the aquarium on EU, and a bunch of friends and I went to the aquarium, which if you don't know is a house where they put uh, in the apartments they build a bunch of thematically appropriate little environments
Mhm.
for each and every fish that you can put in an aquarium, and it's just like the extent, depth, and breadth of RP in this game, ranging from that to gambling to plays. Preach's community put on a play forum. My own community, when they were delivering a wedding invite to Preach, put on like a little scripted scene of coolness to try to convince him to come, and then his community reacted with RP of a much more aggressive kind. We can get into that later if you want. And
I
like
know.
just the variety of expression that people find for their creativity in this game is
Mhm.
amazing. There are people who professionally design houses and then
I've
put
had
these on websites.
I've
You
had
know,
them on and I've talked to them. There's some really amazing housing communities and the things that
yeah.
they think of and the ways that they can somehow take, and it's like this whole puzzle, this whole new creative experience where you
Mhm.
don't have this blank canvas with paint. You have objects and you figure out how to make these objects arrange in a certain way to create what you're actually looking to do. And what they can think of and how they can put these different pieces of furniture together and at these exact heights to make some really crazy stuff is
Mhm.
I don't know. I just can't even like imagine what's going through
Oh
their head
yeah.
and how they can come up with
Yep.
it.
Me either.
Uh,
It's amazing the creativity people have. It's truly inspiring. In fact, I'm a big fan.
yeah, yeah, and so I mean, and that all plays a part in Final Fantasy XIV's RP scene because you can make all these special environments, and that's why you see them over in the housing districts and everything else. And you get into like the E part of the RP stuff. You'll see that's
Of course.
actually a big thing here, and I've seen it a good bit, but I
Okay, I have the mature filter on. Go on.
no, yeah, no. And I can't remember. Did I do a show on? I don't think I have officially done an ERP show yet. 250 something shows, and I haven't done an ERP show.
Well, sounds like it's time.
Yeah, at some point we probably need to do it. Yeah, hands up, I'm good.
But yeah, it's amazing. Our own the FC and community that's grown up around my journey through the MSQ
Mhm,
came together on a new server on Chaos called Sagittarius. And prior to us being able to buy an FC house,
mhm.
the personal housing came available. And they all, conspired. And by conspired, they got together, they made a spreadsheet, they found the best place. And people from our FC, as individuals, we didn't buy FC housing, but individuals managed to buy 28 out of 30 houses in one subdivision, all for themselves. The entire ward is our members.
I don't know
which
how you
is
did
just it's just amazing because it's a tiny server with no one on it.
Okay, yeah.
But it's an amazing opportunity for RP. That it's only a week ago, right? Or maybe 2 weeks at this point. And we have people, this whole ward is an enormous RP zone. We have, casinos, we have a huge house devoted to an amazing dance club. We have I hate to say it, but there's a funeral home. And a bakery and just all of this amazing stuff growing up around a church. There's plans for a courthouse for us to have a community and have events in the future. And it's just like mind-boggling the degree of creativity bring to this enterprise of living out this life together with people from across the world in a video game, which can't be done in kind of any other way.
And this is all from a just recently declared story skipper, only raider, hardcore raider.
Yeah, less than 6 months ago, I was playing World of Warcraft 16 hours a day, getting world first, and had never imagined the idea of doing RP in my life and would have scoffed at the idea. If you had told me that I would be doing this, I would have laughed my ass off at the ridiculousness of the idea.
Final Fantasy XIV is a hell of a drug, man. So, okay. I do want to ask you, because this is kind of it's a touchy subject for a lot of people in Final Fantasy XIV, because this content has had lots of ups and downs. I've been heavily involved with it. But PvP in Final Fantasy XIV, have you done any kind of attempts at
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't even set foot in it. So there's like one barrier to entry to that, which has kind of held me back from doing it. First of all, there's a lot of content, right? I have a list of stuff I want to do, and I can only do one thing at a time. PvP is kind of low on the list. And one of the reasons PvP is kind of low on the list is because it's like its own mini game with different bars and different buttons. That's what I'm given to understand, that do different things. And that's like a little barrier to entry of learning that I'm just not interested in doing right now. So I've skipped it so far. I will at some point. The consensus is like people love it. I haven't run into anyone who says, yo, you shouldn't even try this. So it seems worthwhile, but I haven't touched it yet.
Yeah, it's flipped. It used to be, you should never play it, but with the new expansion, it's changed. And people are very invested in it. And the one word that actually describes it very well is fun, right? You can be very serious and hardcore about it, but if you want to just do some fun PvP, it gives you exactly what you want, which suits most people for Final Fantasy XIV. And so the jobs really feel like they're jobs. Like if you go in there, one of the special moves for Dragoon is to jump in the air for 5 seconds. You're off the ground. And you're just kind of targeting the ground where you're going to land, and then you blow up everybody when you hit the ground.
So that's pretty cool.
Machinists have a sniper rifle. They do a lot of damage really far away. So there's it's different. It's different than what it currently is in Final Fantasy XIV, but it feels good. It's not perfect.
Sounds good and it sounds fun. I definitely want to try it. I'll also admit to being scarred because in World of Warcraft, a mandatory part of competing for World First is all of these things that you say, oh, it's a theme park and you can do what you want. None of it ties into each other. And you're not going to be punished in raids if you don't do Island Sanctuary. You're not going to be punished in Island Sanctuary if you don't do raids. You're not punished in PvP if you don't do... In WoW, it's all tied. They make you do everything. So it's a mandatory part of the World First race in WoW is I have to do 30 or 40 hours of PvP during the week before I'm going to be devoting my life to becoming, the best in the world at a PvE encounter. And nothing makes me angrier, right? I'm usually a calm guy. I'm usually not angry, but I get physically mad at PvP and WoW because of that. And that's probably also polluting my idea of Final Fantasy PvP.
For some reason, an analogy of relating that to IKEA came in my head. I don't know if it's completely appropriate, but having to walk through every single department to get where you want.
Oh yeah. You can't go buy the one thing you need until you go through all of the other parts. Build, not just go through them, but build a piece of furniture from each department. Wouldn't that be terrible? That's a good analogy.
Oh geez, yeah. I don't know if it makes complete sense, but that's the first thing I thought is I hate going to IKEA because I just can't spend time. I know there's shortcuts. I know there's probably other stuff you could do and everything, but it's intimidating going there the first few times just for one piece of furniture. Then you're like, you get
Yeah.
down. All right. Anyways, I'm gonna get off that. I'm gonna spend too much time about IKEA. So, well, okay, PvP. You maybe get into
No
it.
PvP yet, but I'll get into it later. Probably. At least try it. I don't promise to love it, but I'll try it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts when you do. That being said, there is another big piece of content that has been long asked for Final Fantasy XIV. That's something that WoW's had for a while. It's difficult 4-man dungeons, small dungeons.
Mm-hmm. Just coming out now. Very interesting.
So, did you like that kind of stuff in WoW?
So the development and evolution of Mythic Plus and WoW, I think, has been really, really good for the game. I think there's a huge number of people who play WoW almost exclusively for Mythic Plus because it's this like never capped, never ending challenge that you can push as far as you want and is fairly variable and changes every week. It's fresh and interesting all the time. I think overall it is a net positive for the game, yes, because small group content's easier to organize and it keeps it like fresh for a lot of players. There have been lessons from that and pitfalls and mistakes made that I think will be interesting to see how they play out in Final Fantasy.
Yeah. I do know Yoshida has experience with WoW, and he has experience with other MMOs, of course. He has some insight into this. I'm wondering if he's going to take some of those lessons. What they usually do is they bring up content that people might be familiar with, and then they make it their own flavor and their own sort of thing. You can't do the hardest content in the game unless it's with, of course, people you know. So I don't know if it's going to create any really bad environments or anything. But the biggest concern that he's always had with it was if a healer dies, you're screwed, right? And they feel like that was just too much like pressure to put on like that kind of one person there. But I want to see it succeed.
I wanted to see it succeed, dude. That's a really interesting point. I think that something I've kind of noticed and haven't talked about it a lot, but it's been kind of mulling over in my mind, is that I talk to way more people in Final Fantasy who have anxiety about letting their friends down in these key roles as healer or tank than I ever encountered in WoW. And I think it's probably because Final Fantasy is really good and borderline militant about policing their community. If you're the kind of person who blames everything on others and expresses that blame through frustration, anger, and toxicity, you're going to experience some bans. You're less likely to continue playing. You're going to get weeded out, and the community gets self-selected more toward being positive. And if you're the kind of person who loves playing with your friends, playing as a team, being really positive, saying good morning when you join a party, then you're going to be self-selected into it. And in WoW, it's kind of the opposite, right? They don't police that at all. And so you kind of self-select toward a more toxic community. In WoW, people don't feel any anxiety about walking into a Mythic Plus and healing because if they fail or die, it's everyone else's fault, Whereas in Final Fantasy, there's a more overall positive community that I think has resulted in a higher selection of people with anxiety about having these responsible positions. And I think that the developers being sensitive to that is one of the reasons why, for example, like we talked about earlier, healing is a little bit simpler and easier. And it makes sense, like you said, that ties into them saying, well, maybe in these dungeons, we'll have these supplemental things going on that make it so you don't necessarily need to have a healer. You'll have other people who can also res to try to address that anxiety that we've seen in the community.
No, yeah, and I think it makes it a little bit better. I mean, they did that with PvP. PvP was like, it was mandatory 2 DPS, a tank, and a healer when you queued up to do stuff. But everything was always dependent on if a healer could keep the team alive. Your team members had some things to help them out, but it was so much pressure on one person. And now with the new PvP system, they're like, nah, we don't care what you do. 5 DPS, fine, whatever. It'll work out some way. Everybody can keep each other alive. Healing barely does anything. So they changed that concept. I mean, they are going to make it a little bit more mandatory in the very difficult raids, I think, that you have to have those certain roles and everything else. But the people going into it know what they're going into, right?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be a challenge, and you can only do it with your pre-formed party, and you're more comfortable taking on and failing and trying again and failing and not going to hate each other over it.
It'd be interesting if they did something similar to the MDI, I guess, with
It'd be
But
interesting, but I hope they delay it, if you know what I mean.
oh yeah,
The way I
absolutely.
see this is as a first experimental iteration, and I hope they take it slow and don't make some of the easy mistakes it is to make.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is one thing: Final Fantasy 14 isn't completely afraid to make mistakes because they do
True.
kind of throw stuff out there, and they're like, "Well, it didn't work out very well." Back in the day, uh, what was it? Diadem. This might sound like something that you have no clue what it is.
Nope.
It's for it turned into kind of a crafter's thing, but it was basically giant dinosaurs spawning on flying islands and stuff, and just massively people zerging these giant dinosaurs to try to get rolled gear that sometimes had better stats and everything else, and it failed horribly. I know WoW kind of has something similar to that, if I remember right.
World bosses, yeah, I guess.
Something with gear being rolled, different stats and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, that used to be more of a thing. They're still tertiary. Yeah, I know what you mean, and WoW does have something like that a little bit, and it is almost never popular.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, they've had content that's completely just died, and they've just never touched again. But they try to see what sticks, and then they start supporting it more if it does work out pretty well.
I think that hard 4-man content, hard small group content is likely to be really popular because it historically has been, and WoW and other games, and it's something that people really want, and I hope it succeeds and grows.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that popularity, there's also the risk, I feel, of over changing things maybe in reaction to or as a result of it.
Yeah.
If you start seeing groups that are like, okay, so this is actually quite legitimately difficult, and to throw out probably the most obvious example, only warrior tanks allowed, right? Because warrior tanks aren't going to die, and you can do bigger pulls, and you can live longer and clear the dungeon more likely. Because if the tank dies, much like if the healer dies, you're probably going to wipe. Aggro is going to go all over the place. Everyone else is going to die, and if you die in these hard dungeons, everything respawns. It gets harder. You failed, right? And now you're mad. So okay, only warrior tanks allowed. Okay, does that perpetuate through the community? Does the community have bad feelings about balance issues? Does this start resulting in tuning changes or even redesign changes oriented around 4-man content? Does that then spread into 8-man content? It's like this spreading amoeba of possibilities just because of this, that I hope they're cautious with, is the only thing I'm saying. I want it to succeed. I want it to be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But the more competitive you make it and the more like difficult you make it at the high end, the margins, the more difficult balance is. And in WoW, that turned into a hornet's nest.
I can see it happening. That is something, when you've ever watched the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr.?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have this whole vision of things happening in the future and all this other stuff. I feel like that kind of just happened a little bit. Of course. I do feel confident that's going to be possibly an issue going forward. Although, I don't know. They're doing decent with the job balance overall.
I would say phenomenally. Coming from WoW, the job balance in this game is out of this world.
Yeah. And I don't know if they would... I think their goal would always be to balance towards the 8-man raids in general, but maybe they will. Depends on how the success of the content is. If it's
if it grows and becomes super popular.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things you can do if you're worried about because things sometimes work differently in 4-man. Something might be unbelievably strong in 4-man, like for example, a white mage pushing holy, and completely irrelevant in a raid. There's things you can do. You can make it so, okay, we like holy in leveling dungeons, and we like holy in, whatever other content, but we don't like holy locking down packs for 6 seconds in this most difficult content, because now groups are like white mage or no other healer. You can make it so holy doesn't stun mobs in your most difficult content, or you can make it so it only doesn't work, in that content. You can do stuff that's tuned to the content you're trying to affect. I'm not saying that it's a pitfall they're guaranteed to fall in. I'm not issuing any call to action. I'm not saying this is doomed to fail. I'm just saying I hope they're cognizant of some of these issues that could arise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've had different solutions for it in the past. Like Basha in chat, that's a very good example. Is that they kind of alter or augment these actions with things in the game. With what was it? shit. It was PvP was doing that in some shape or regard, where PvP basically they said, hey, we're going to augment some of the abilities to balance out the content in a PvP environment. Then they said, screw it, we're just giving you completely different abilities. And they scrapped the whole thing, and that's why we have what we have now. But that being said, I just minimized your little thing there. I don't know how to get that back. Hold on. I got it. Oh, did I DC? Hold on.
Oh, you're back. There you are.
I didn't DC. I clicked on Discord because I saw a 1 on my thing. Or I saw like a message, right? It said, popped up, hey, you have a message. I was like, oh shit. What if Jesse sent me a message? He's like, man, I gotta fucking go tidy this shit up. And then I missed it. And so I clicked on it, and it wasn't you, but it took me out of the
call.
Yeah, yep. I didn't realize
I tapped over your stream, and I wasn't following it, so I couldn't type. I was like, my friends in my chat, go tell them I can't hear them. Turn up the volume to hear.
yeah, that was on me goofing up there. But yeah, I was checking Discord. I was basically saying PvP, you know, I don't know how much did you even hear of what I said?
Absolutely none.
Okay, so I was saying, you know, they've experimented in different ways with what they do with reactions to different content and how to adjust things. Baja is a very great example because they made augments with different items and different potions and everything else to kind of balance some of that stuff out. But with PvP, they did that as well, but they did it with just the actions. They're like, when in PvP, this action also does this, all right? And they did a whole bunch of that. And then at some point, they just said, fuck it, and deleted all the actions and just made actions that are only PvP actions. So it would be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. There's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of ways it could go, and I'm sure, like you said, they deserve a lot of trust, and I'm sure they're going to be watching it and paying attention and going to have good ideas how to make sure it works well. I'm excited about small group content. I think it'll be really fun to go into hard dungeons because it's something that's definitely a gap in this game. Dungeons are ridiculously easy. Yeah. It'll be cool, and it'll be an adjustment too, because like right now you go in, there's a telegraph for everything. You don't really care what the mobs are casting. No one CC's trash. You just do the things. And I'm expecting it to be very different. And you'll start being like, oh, we got to watch cast bars, look at where the mobs are facing, a whole new set of skills that are going to make people better at the game and having fun improving at the game. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Man. All right. Well, we are kind of hitting that point. We've been talking for 2 hours. Which is
and we've only just gotten started.
Yeah, it feels like we've only just gotten started. I do want to prompt and see if there's anything that we haven't talked about throughout the show today that you're like, man, this is something I want to talk about with Final Fantasy XIV and your experience overall, or anything that's coming up that you're excited about. Can you think of anything off the top of your head? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
The easiest answer there is that for the first time ever, I'm all the way caught up with you guys, and I'm with you now as we move into 6.2. I'm going to experience with everyone else as part of the community what's happening with Ritra and his sister, going to this new world again, kind of, and seeing what's going on there, seeing how they tie in the past expansions, whether we save her sister, and then, you know, caught up on Hildebrand, what's happening with that. The first time that I'm going to be participating in a live, you know, relic pursuit. So I'm really excited to now feel like instead of, you know, catching up to, I'm now part of the community. So.
Hey, man, how does that feel in comparison to WoW's community and being a part of, you know, that? Does it feel kind of weird?
I'm sorry, did you suggest that there's a WoW community?
Yeah, I guess I did.
I mean, I don't want to malign it. There are people who RP in WoW. There are people who play WoW for all kinds of reasons. It's a huge game. But I've never been part. There are people who care about WoW's story too and pay attention to it. I've just never been part of it. I would. You know, well, I mean, the thing is retrospectively me too, up to until Wrath, right? Wrath and all of the stuff based on Warcraft 3 was really good story.
Yeah,
I honestly think very good, interesting story. But I started in WoD.
That's true. I mean, I have.
So
books,
I've never paid attention.
Right, I've read books that they put out for it and everything else, and I tried to keep up, and I was so excited for it, and then I just said I'm done at a certain point. Wrath of the Lich King with Arthas at the end of it. That was the peak for a lot of people who were in the Warcraft 3,
Mhm.
right? That was
Yeah,
that was the
I
thing.
played Warcraft 3, so, like, retrospectively, not even having played Wrath, that is the peak of its storytelling to me. That's good stuff, but then apparently the world blew up, and then there were pandas, and then we went
Yeah.
into an alternate timeline, and then there's a big sword in the planet, and I played this part, and I still don't really understand what happened, and the sword's still there, but we went to another alternate future or heaven, maybe? I'm not sure, and now they're going back? Whatever.
Mhm.
I don't pay attention.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. I do want to ask, because we did talk a little bit. You said doing the Hildebrandt storyline and everything. It's such an interesting thing because it's just a separate thing, right? It's like this little sitcom that you follow. It's Final Fantasy 14 based. How do you feel about that whole storyline? Are you attached to it?
I don't know that I'm like emotionally invested in it the way that I am with the Scions, for example,
Mhm.
but I enjoyed it, right? It ranged from, mildly entertaining, borderline boring at times to straight up laugh out loud, jumping in my seat. This is hilarious moments. It's a sitcom, like you said, and
Yeah.
I never felt compelled to skip it. I never felt annoyed by it like I did at some other parts. It was to me really a solid part of the story of Final Fantasy that I kind of enjoyed. Lighthearted fun.
Yeah. And it's so weird to think about because it's not part of the main story or anything that's really big. I think, to my understanding, super lore heavy, unless if you care about the gold saucer, I guess. It isn't like I mean, the person who made the gold saucer responsible for there's some stuff. Yeah.
No, it's so funny because I this is another example of those moments when I had someone got real angry with me because going through the MSQ instead of people who went through the story like you did encountered Hildebrand and Godbert before they got to the part of the MSQ where Nanamo is trying to figure out how to help the refugees get Talamigo, and she goes and talks to Godbert, right? So you guys know who Godbert was. I get to Godbert in Gold Saucer. I have no idea who he is. I've never encountered him before. Chat's all like, Giga Chad, amazing man. And I'm like, who is this horrible oligarch who is telling Nanamo not to help the refugees? And Chat's just like pissed at me. How dare you? This is our boy.
Mhm.
Just kind of another example of that disconnect that happens sometimes.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. I don't know. It was. I've never side stories and that stuff never really meant anything to me in like most games like that. But this is like the trademark. Everyone's always asking about it. When is there going to be an update to this quest line? When are they going to do more stuff with the story? And I find it kind of interesting because I don't think they've updated it in a while. I could be wrong. By the way, if you haven't noticed, like when I had a child, I pretty much had a pretty hard disconnect from a lot of things that were going on. Did the world race stuff for the Savage part, but then like the last handful of months outside of the last month or two was a little bit of a disconnect. So I missed a lot of the Dragon Song Reprise stuff, and I had some really cool people handle that event for us. But it was there's a couple things that I missed recently, and I feel kind of stupid about it because I've played this game for so long.
And for the first time, you feel like you don't know what's going on in it. It makes
sometimes
sense.
Yeah, sometimes that happens, and I feel pretty bad. But yeah, no, man, I'm glad to have this talk with you. I didn't know a whole bunch about you. I knew a decent amount, right? I knew who you are. I knew everything with Echo and being, of course, world racing stuff. I have to have some sort of insight to that. But talking to you has been like a great experience.
I'm glad. I've had a good time talking about it as well. It's always, talking about your passions is fun.
Yeah.
And hearing the best part about chat, right? We all meme chat, but the best part about chat is that people from all over the world can bring these different experiences and perspectives to bear and have this conversation with you about their experiences and how these great stories resonate with their experiences, which will often be different. And so I loved sitting down and talking with you for many of the same reasons.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, Final Fantasy 14 community is super global. It's so weird to me, and maybe you experience this a lot more because you're doing a lot of the world race stuff with WoW. But I didn't really have any kind of insight into what that was like until I'm getting translators on and I'm talking to Japanese players on the show. And it's just so weird how global it is. Like my friends are in multiple different countries of the world, right? And Final Fantasy 14 is giving me that opportunity that I don't think the normal person really has that kind of experience.
Oh yeah, it's unique, I think, to gaming maybe, or to MMO gaming or something like that. Normal people who live in the Midwest, like I do, don't get to talk to people every day from Germany and France and Russia and Japan and South Korea and Singapore and England and Norway and Denmark and South America and South Africa, and I do. It's enriching, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So that all being said, I'm sure you got other things to go do.
Oh yeah, getting married tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. On that note, you're welcome to come to the party if you want. You're invited, just like everyone else.
Awesome.
Speaking of RP, we're having a party tomorrow after the wedding at one of the Endless Nights events venues. There's going to be DJs playing live, and there's going to be dancing and all of the good stuff. It's going to be a blast. Another RP event for everyone. I'm really excited about it. Everyone in chat's invited.
Okay. What time is it?
It is at the party is at 8:00 Central European time, which is 1 p.m. my time, which is 11 a.m. your time over there on the west-ish coast. You're on Arizona weird daylight savings time, right?
Yeah. I don't know anymore because they changed daylight savings time, and I don't know where we are, if we're gonna go back and try to it's such a goofy weird thing.
It is. It's strange.
But yeah, no, that'd be awesome. I'll as long as the baby's okay. We'll see. I'm still in that everything. Yeah,
you got a newborn. It's the same thing with Scripe, right? Scripe is our business leader, right? The leader of Echo. He's got a baby while also trying to run a World Force Guild. It is. Yeah. I can only imagine how hard that can be, and how busy you are. In fact, I'm fairly convinced that nature has designed our brains to forget what the first 6 months to a year of having a baby is like, because otherwise you'd never do it again.
Oh, man. I think that's the same thing with giving birth, right? Most people who give birth, they don't remember how horrible it was, because if they did,
because then you'd never do it again.
It's bad. It's real bad.
I don't remember. I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh man. I remember. I don't. My wife, she might start, to forget. But it was. Anyways, we're going into this whole thing. I'm sure people don't want to hear us talk about being dads.
Childbirth. Yeah. I'm not sure that should be the topic right now. Talking about people being dads, that's great content. Talking about babies being born.
It's just a little. Yeah. It is. But that being said, actually, is this one of your mods or something, or someone that has links?
Which one?
Someone saying that can they post a link in here?
I'm not sure.
All right.
Oh, that's if you allow that link, that is just a visual. That's the art showing when the party is. That's all.
I don't know if my MooBot's working, or if there's something that would actually block it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. You're good. Oh, someone else. I don't know.
That's the wrong Ellie.
Oh, is it the wrong one? Let me try it again. It's try that. Did that work? It happens every time. I'm so sorry. It happens every single time. I can't ever get it right.
All good. It's also on my Twitter. Anyone in chat's welcome to come to the party. It should be a really good time.
Yeah, and by the way, so people can find you, can you tell them all the different ways that they can find you?
Okay, so I stream at twitch.tv/JeatheBelle, JeatheBelle, and then I tweet at twitter.com/JeatheWow, which at this point has become a little problematic since I no longer play WoW. We'll figure out what happens with that. Mm-hmm. And you can also find me in Discord from either of those sources.
Okay. Do you are you going to try to change it?
I might. I looked at it the other day. I'm a horribly impulsive and impatient person. I looked at it the other day. I tried to change it to Jeeth. That was taken. I tried to change it to Jesse. That was taken. I was like, I give up. I quit. So
you tried to change it to Jesse?
Yeah, Jesse was gone. Obviously, right? There's a million Jessies, many of them, famous. But those didn't work, and I was just like, I give up. So at some point, I'll try to figure out some kind of a name that works and change it to that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's a huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, eventually it'll probably wear on you.
It'll be weird that people try to find me at WoW and I don't play WoW. Yeah.
You could just say, that's not actually World of Warcraft. It's just WoW,
WoW,
right?
Jeez, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, that being said, is there anything else you want to say? Any other shout outs before we wrap up the show?
No. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I had a really good time, and I appreciate the chance to chat with you and your friends in chat.
Okay, yeah, of course. It's been a blast. That being said, just to let everyone else know, MogTalk stuff, we do plan to have a show next week. I believe it's going to be another rating show, or not another rating show, but whenever I you on, I was like, kind of rating. But yeah, we're going to have a show discussing rating next week. Then we're going to have a World Race show probably right after that one. I will be personally doing commentary for Square Enix PvP event that will happen. Why can't I remember the date? It's the beginning of September, which is going to be around the same time the World Race is going to be going on as well. So catch me over there if you want to check that out. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. You all have been fantastic. And I usually make everybody wave, at the end. But you just say bye really like charismatically. And I think
because no camera.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
All right, guys. Remember, do a stupid catchphrase for everyone. Be good, keep cool, stay frosty. Ha! Okay, bye, guys.